One of the things I always want to put out there, because I want people to understand, is I started the company that I run now 7 years ago. And first couple of years, breaking off and just trying to be a developer, like that's tough stuff. I've been in real estate basically 20 years now. And the first 15 were awful. It was only the last 5 where I'm like, okay, all the stuff I did for the prior 15 or 17 now have put me in this position to do all these things that I'm doing. The other theme that was going on in my life while I'm going through those experiences is I'm a very unhappy person.
Okay.
So I think when I'm making some of those statements about, I wish it was different, I wish I would have done it this way. I don't know, because I think you bring up an excellent point. I don't know that it was necessarily, I wish my career path was different. Maybe, and I'm only just kind of saying this now as I'm thinking about it. I think what I wished for was I felt different while I was doing it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think that's the kind of the missing link here is because you're right. I mean, I would not be the person I am. I wouldn't be the developer I am. I wouldn't be doing the stuff I'm doing today if I had gone to Wisconsin, got a real estate development degree, became an analyst at equity office in Chicago. I mean, I'd be some VP making good money, but wearing a suit every day or I would have had a midlife crisis and broke away. But I mean, right. I mean, so I see I totally see what you mean. And I've said this online before that, people look at my career or look at where I am now and, I have a newsletter now that I write every week. And it's so great. I get a dozen emails every week saying, thank you so much for doing this. Like, I hope, I want to be where you are. Not that I want to be you, but I want to be where you are someday, all these things. And one of the things I always want to put out there, because I want people to understand is, I started the company that I run now a little under 7 years ago. And, this as well as anyone, the first couple of years breaking off and just trying to be a developer, like that's tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been in real estate, basically 20 years now. And these last 5, I didn't think it could ever be this good. Right. I mean, my life is about as good as you can imagine. Or it can get. The first 15 were awful in my opinion. You know what I mean? It was only the last 5 where I'm like, okay, all the stuff I did for the prior 15 or 17 now have put me in this position to do all these things that I'm doing. So I think that's part of it is I was having these life experiences, getting started in therapy and kind of running those dual tracks. And, I can tell you more about the story, but I got to a point many, many years later living here in Minneapolis, and I'll never forget it. I'd been in therapy for 15 years off and on at that point. And I knew I was ready to be a developer. I wanted to, I knew it in my heart. But my biggest holdup was the confidence to go do it and just to know that I could. And I had a therapy session one time, 8 months before I started my company, where it was like, for the first time, I think I was 38 when it happened, where like for the first time, it just all clicked. I walked out of the office a different person. I walked out of that therapy office like, I can do anything. Here I go. And so that was the unlock, but it took, from being 22 and graduating college, being an actor for a few years, then, thinking about law school. And what ended up happening was my girlfriend moved to San Francisco. So I was like, look, I'm 25. I might as well go with her. What else am I doing? Right. I might as well go have an adventure. She was cool about me not going to law school. She's like, yeah, if it's not for you, don't do it. Just figure out what you want to, figure out something to do. And let's hopefully not live on someone's couch someday if we can avoid it. And I got a job selling mortgages because it was 2003 or it was 2004. That was a good job for a guy with no experience who could talk to people, who was good on the phone. That was a good start. But I quickly realized, like, I don't want to cold call for a living and like try to refinance people's houses all day long. Like, it's not enjoyable to me. So I started calling everybody I knew. I was like, I got to figure out what the options are here. What's, I kind of like this business thing. Making money isn't actually that bad. It's kind of fun. And what are the other ways that I could like do this that might be a little more enjoyable for me? And, as I said earlier, like the internet was still in its infancy. So I would call my friend's dad, right? I'd call my friend Chris and say, hey, your dad's a banker. Can I talk to your dad? I'd call his dad, talk to his dad for half an hour and say, hey, who else should I call? And, I went probably 2-3 dozen phone calls over like 6 months and ended up at a developer. And that was my last call. And it ended up it didn't have because I knew after that call, I didn't need to make any more calls. But talking to a guy who was doing development, converting a prison into housing, just was doing all this really creative, cool stuff. And I'm embarrassed to say it, I didn't even know that what a developer was at that point. I was 20, 25, 26. I was like, I didn't even know that was a job.
Yeah.
Like, I thought these buildings just kind of appeared. I didn't realize that like this went into it. Had this talk with them and was like, wow, I've always liked art. I've liked design. I think I'm decent at like, I think I can like coordinate and manage people and inspire them to do stuff. And like, I was like, all right, I'm going to go be a developer. This sounds awesome. And so I was 26, living in the Bay Area. It was still when you had to, type out a resume and type out a cover letter and look online at monster.com and all the job listings. I blanketed the Bay Area with probably 200 resumes and cover letters. Every developer, any brokerage house, anything that said real estate in the name, they got my resume and cover letter. And being that I had 6 months at a law firm, 4 years of acting, and a lot of bartending experience, as you can imagine, I didn't get any calls.
Yeah. It's tough to break into. I tell people all the time, I say there's 3 ways to get into real estate development. And I think you're right. Like so many people, my kids are all, 18 to 22. And I talk to a lot of their friends, and it's just so common to not know much at all. They just don't know that much, about, job titles and career paths and what people do. I mean, they're not taught that, and especially if, you're not studying it specifically. So I used to teach at Ohio State, and I would tell people there's 3 ways to do this. You either get a job in something around it, right? Appraisal, brokerage, banking, finance, insurance, something, right? You just start doing it, you beg, borrow, and steal and figure out how to buy, find a deal, bring it to somebody, whatever. Right. Or you get extremely lucky and somebody hires you, which nobody really wants to do because nobody wants to hire somebody who doesn't have any experience.
Right. And I would say I did 2 of those things combined. I got hired, but I got really, really lucky.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was I got a call from one of the resumes. And this nice woman with a Texas accent, she's like one of my good friends to this day. I mean, I owe her everything. And called me and said, she called me honey. She was like, honey, I got your resume, but we're hiring a receptionist. And why are you applying for this? It looks like you're selling mortgages. Like what? I just kind of said, look, here's who I am. I'm trying to break in. I'm smart, but I need somebody to I need my foot in the door. I will do anything. And we hit it off. It was just one of those moments where, we hit it off on the phone.
Yeah.
She was like, they're going to kill me for doing this, but why don't you come in and meet the guys? She's like, tell them you'll be the receptionist, but just come in and meet them.
Yeah.
And, I was living in the South Bay and I said, sure. It turned out the office was an hour and 20 minutes. It was in Marin. It was about an hour and 20 minutes from my apartment. Got in my Honda Civic and went up there the next day after work and sat down with one of the partners, and he was like, what do you do? What? Like, he was very confused. And but we ended up having this great conversation. And I kept saying, look, I promise you I'm smart. I'm looking for a foot in the door. I will sit at the front desk. I'll make you coffee. I'll make copies. I will do anything. I only need gas money and rent. Like, you don't have to pay me very much. And I must have made a compelling case. Because a week later they called me and they said, yeah, come back in and meet the rest of the team. I went up there and met the rest of them. And they ended up offering me a job to be the receptionist. And what I didn't know at the time was it was 2 guys who ran Trammell Crow's West Coast arm. and they had recently broken off and formed their own entity. So the name was Thompson Dorfman Partners, but I was basically going to sit at the foot of two guys who had run Trammell Crow on the West Coast, which at that point meant nothing to me, but in hindsight, again, was like, wow, how couldn't have gotten luckier. And it was a 4-person office, and it was super busy. And after about a month and a half, they couldn't believe that I was still commuting an hour. I mean, I was commuting an hour and a half each way to be the receptionist for $40,000 a year in the Bay Area, which was basically like nothing. And I just kept saying, look, I'm whatever I can do. And Brett, I made the best coffee. I made the best copies. I got there before them. I stayed late. I did anything they wanted. One time I picked one of their kids up from school. I was just like, look, I am here to help you and to serve you. All I'm looking for is a chance. And about 3 months in, one of the VPs came over to me. He was really swamped. And he was like, look, do you know how to do Excel? And I was like, yeah, of course. What do you got? And he gave me some, pro forma or something. I didn't even know what Excel was. I had to go home that night and like go online and try to figure out what Excel was, but managed to figure it out. And within about a year, I got lucky because they got busy. And within about a year, they offered me a project to manage. I took a 48 unit deal in Santa Clara from beginning to end, and still sat at the front desk, still had to make copies and coffee and do all the other stuff, but got going. And, a few years after that, I was doing 2 or 3 at a time. We finally hired another receptionist. And I was an associate at the firm, and worked my way up for 4 or 5 years, and, was paycheck to paycheck, was barely scraping by. My girlfriend was in grad school, but I kept telling myself, like, this is your take. Like, you just have to stick with it. Like, whatever you do, stick with it.
Yeah. It's great. It's a really great message for people to hear. I think, I was going to say for young people to hear, but I think for anybody, because I do think we live in such and I even hesitate to say this because I'm like, oh, maybe I'm sounding like a boomer, I do think that's such an immediate gratification, and everybody's looking at everybody on Instagram, and everyone wants to be rich and famous and a big shot and a developer or whatever they want to be. And, sometimes you gotta make copies and pick kids up from school and get coffee. If that's what you want, right? Like if if you might not get, you said you got a combination of luck, but yeah, maybe lucky that she gave you a chance to be a receptionist, but you were also willing to be a receptionist, and you were willing to stay late and get there early and do everything. And that's not luck at all. Right. That is dedication, commitment, hard work, humility, and focus on, trying to really get what it is you actually do want, and doing whatever it takes to get there. And I think that is a message that people need to hear, especially that it might take time. You have to play a long game. Yeah. You get to be, what are you, 46?
46. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So you get to be 46 and go, this last 5 years has been a dream. That's still pretty young.
Yeah.
Things go well. You get to do that for a long, long time to come. Yep. You can live a dream the entire second half of your life. Right. That's worth it.